Okay, Kumlen and a Black Gemara. Today's daf is of Kufta Zayin Amid Aleph. So we had a machlekes Abaye and Rava. When do we have to suspect that there's another person with the same name as the star that the get, let's say, that you found or not? Abaye said that that you do have to be concerned there's another person with the same name, so you have to first investigate. And Rava says no. Otherwise, why check just the city? Check the entire world. Rava says you can assume that this person here is and this woman here is the one that the get belongs to. Now the Gemara will tell us a story which is exactly the opposite, where Abaye and Rava holds exactly the opposite. So tell us the Gemara says as follows. We are up to 4 lines on top of the page. Hogita, there was a divorce. A get the Shtakar Basura was found in Suda, the street of Suda. The Kasabeh was written in Hachi. This is what is written in the divorce itself. Besura Mosa, in the city of Suda, Onan bar Chia Neherdoi, Onan, the son of Chia, from the city of Neherdoi. Patrit, I released with Rechet, and I divorced Ploinis, and Tasi, this woman, my wife. They checked out from Suda to see if anybody could have found on the ground, to see if anybody else with that same name, and the wife has to have the same name as well. There was nobody else by the same name, Levad, but there was one other person whose name was Onan bar Chia from the town of Chagra, who now shifted and moved to the Havim moved to Nadoi. So there was one other person by that same name. Now remember, the get was found in Syria, and it's written in the get itself that this the get was documented in Syria. There was another person from Nadoi as well, but and so what? So how do we know which one it is? But Asu Sadi came along 2 witnesses, but Oman told us that who Yoma on that day, the date written on the get. Ki Ichta Ogita is written on the get. Onan bar Chia and Chagra Gabon Hava. That Onan bar Chia actually was in the Hadoi, it wasn't even in Surah. In other words, it was impossible for him to be in Surah. And therefore, so that's the only other person that we know about. As a result of that, we can assume that this Onan bar Chia that was here in Surah, that this woman is claiming to be her husband, that's correct. And the other Onan was in the day that day anyway, so it couldn't have been him. So Amar Abaye, Abaye makes a comment. Even according to me, in the case of Yitzchak Reish Gelusa that we learned about yesterday, right? That he traveled to Spain and then he died. And Abaye said, you got to check out, see if anybody else called Yitzchak Reish Gelusa. He says, even though I'm normally concerned, here we're not concerned at all. Why not? The witnesses said that this only other person that we know about was actually in the city of Nador at the time. My boy Surah. How is it possible they should be in Surah the same day? It's impossible. So therefore, there's nothing further to investigate. We can rely on his get. Comes along Rav and says just the opposite. Even though I ruled when it came to Yitzchak Gelusa, I said, don't worry. We don't have to suspect it's anybody else. Here we are worried because here, now that we've established, remember, Rava says that we're not concerned if it wasn't muhzik, we're not established. But now that it's been established that there's another person by the same name, true that he was in the door at the time, I would say investigate further. And why is that? What are we worried about exactly? Maybe he was able to take an airplane or a flying camel. Actually, in the latest form, they talk about that the Gemara says Gamla Porcha, it's actually referred to an airplane because based on traces in Avodah Zarah, Alexander, they went in an air balloon and he flew up and he saw the curvature of the world and so on and so forth. And we had the Gemara Sanhedrin at the very end, Migdal HaParech Ba'avir. So whether the Rashi there has 5 different interpretations, what exactly means Migdal HaParech Ba'avir. So they want to say more Makis or here when it says Gamla Pircha, maybe the Gemara is alluding to the theory of that. Or Inami Bekfitza. Somehow or another he was able to run so quickly that he was able to get to Sudan on the same day. Or Inami Mili Mosa. Or the most acceptable answer is why Rava was worried is who said that you have to be in the same city, that the husband has to be in the city where the get is written, and therefore you're assuming that because Onan was in the Doye, Bachri was in the Doye at the time, it couldn't be that Onan, had to be the other Onan. Who said? Everyone said to the Sefer, Huna would say to his scribes, when you're in the city of Shili, you guys are in Shili, the Sefer, that's where you're writing it, record the city as Shili. No, I gave you instructions in the city of Hini, don't write Hini and Shilu says there was two cities that were very close to each other. So you would think of the neighboring cities, just write down where the husband is. No, write down precisely the city where you're writing the get. So why couldn't it be that the Anan Bachia of the city of Nadoy instructed these Seifrim in Surah to write it? He didn't have to be there personally. When you're in Hini, write Hini. I forgot the minister in Mila Bishili, even though he gave them instructions in the Shili. Okay, getting back to the original story we had about the case of the sesame seeds in the barrel with the nifkid. The deposit, the mafkid said, these are mine, and he gave him a number, and the nifkid said, no, it was yours, I gave it back to you, this is my own. What do we do there? My Havi, what's the bottom line? The case of sesame seeds. We don't think that he swapped it and give it back to the depositor, to Mafkid. And Avina says, this Mafkid doesn't have a good enough simon. And we have a rule when it comes to mammon, when it comes to money matters, that we have a thing called cheskes mammon, it leaves it where it is. The Hilchas of Chashin, the halacha is that we are chayshid, that we are worried, that maybe that the nifkid has it's his own. The mafkid wants to extract it. He needs to prove that it's his. The number is not enough of a simon. Okay, says Gemara.
Can I just ask a question on the previous? What are we worried about when they found the divorce of the names of who is who? Why are they worried that some unrelated person is going to step in to claim that he divorced someone he wasn't married to?
Because we're talking about they all have the same names. We learning more Gittin that a get has to, right in the beginning, a get has to be written Lishma. If the get was not written particularly for your wife, for example, a guy has two wives and he writes, and they both have the same name. And he's not sure, he knows he has to divorce one of them, he doesn't know which one. So he says to himself, you know what? I'm going to write down a get to the wife's name. And whoever walks out the door first is going to be, that's the one that the divorce is going to be working for. So we say, according to, if you hold aim braid, we say that's not a valid get. Why not? Because it has to be written Lishma. What happens if the other person wrote it? I mean, there's different scenarios. What happens if the other person wrote it and he changed his mind? But he actually wasn't this husband and this woman. She wants to get out of her marriage. She found the get, or someone found the get. She's so happy she's divorced. But really, her husband never wrote it. It was another husband who wrote it for this wife. And that guy then changed his mind, and so on. And therefore, this get is a apostle get. It's the wrong husband and wife. And
but we know she was the only woman. She was the only woman of that name, so we know.
No. We're talking about that the man and the woman have to have the same name. If the man has the same name, not the woman, is not talking about. So she's Rachel. Both wives are Rachel, and both husbands are Anan Bachia. Let's say. Yeah. That's why there's a problem. Okay. Then we had in the Mishnah that even though we believe in the manas of an Eid Echad, which normally by Dover every two, even though we believe in the manas of a woman, we don't want it to remain in Laguna, so we help her out, and so on. So then we said, but if it's a time of war, then we have a problem. We cannot rely on her testimony because maybe it's been the dummy. She saw the person shot, didn't wait around to see whether the person actually ended up dying or not. So therefore, her testimony is not good enough. It's only a case of probability. That is not called testimony. Let me add a shining more before. What about if the Eid Echad together with her? Because an Eid Echad, the question is, why do we believe in Eid Echad? We normally need two Eid. Is it because it's a milsa davida legluya, which means that if the husband's still alive, eventually he'll come back. The Eid will be scared because they will go his whole reputation, everything else. So therefore, he's going to make sure that he says the correct testimony. And in fact, others say milsa legluya means it's not even considered testimony because he's just telling us a fact that we're going to find out anyway ourselves. So that's why we believe Eid Echad. Or is it because it's the Eid Echad together with her? Because she knows the consequences if the husband comes back and she got remarried, the children will be mamzerim. So she will be much more thorough and investigated. So it's really two witnesses, the wife and the single Eid. So in the case, and we had the question, in the case of war, if the Eid Echad comes along, do we believe the Eid Echad or not? Because we say that the woman's thorough research is not supportive in this case because it's been the dummy. So now the other variable the Mishnah gives is katata, if there's a discord in that family. So therefore, the first opportunity she has to get out, she will take it and won't necessarily give the correct due diligence. So there's some kind of strife between him and her. What's the definition of strife? Everybody has arguments. So how do you define a discord? She says, she turns around to her husband and says, I want you to divorce me. And the fact that she says, I want you to divorce me, tells us that there's no shalom bayis there. So the Gemara says an interesting thing here. In every person's marriage, there's always a time when the wife says to the husband, I can't stand this anymore. I'm going to get out. So that doesn't prove anything. Just spur of the moment. Ella, she says to the husband, you actually divorced me already. And if she already said to the husband, you divorced me already, then obviously there's no shalom bayis. It's not a question of please divorce me, something about the past. We're no longer married. Says the Gemara, if she actually said that to the husband, living with Ksubas already, then the fact she will be believed that she is divorced. Because Amar Abuna said, Isha Shamra, any woman that says Lebaila to the husband's face, Girashtani, you divorced me previously, Nemena, she's believed. Because Chazaka ain't Isha Me'izah B'nei Baila. We have a Chazaka that a person is not going to make up such a story in looking the other person in the eye and say, but it's never that you gave me a get. We have the same chazaka. Let's say a borrower says to a lender, "You never lent me the money." Chazaka ain't other meiz ish, malda. That a person is not going to have the chutzpah to look someone in the eyes. One thing to say a story when the other person's not around, but look someone in the eyes and make such an outright lie. People generally don't have the chutzpah. So if she would say that to her husband in his face, "You divorced me last year," she believed. So if that's what happened, and it's not a question of who cares if the husband died or didn't die. Then whenever she said it, we believed her. So the Gemara says that this is what happened. We're talking about a case here by Meta. She did say, plenty. You divorced me, and these two people there saw it, right? You have to have Eidim Mesira, Eidim who saw it. And then we found those two witnesses, and we asked them. The Omer, they said, Lahadam, it never happened. So now she's a proven liar. But on the other hand, even though she's a proven liar, but on the other hand, she said that you divorced me, which means there's terrible shalom ma'aseh. That's called a ktata. So it's not just an argument or anger or a fit of rage. Ktata means that she comes up with such an outlandish statement and she said we're no longer married, when in fact the get never happened. My time in the ktata. So what's the svara? Why is it when there's strife we don't believe her? Because she's ready to lie. She doesn't like the husband, and she will lie and say that he's dead, even though he's not really dead. That's one way. Or I've seen or because she is so happy to get out of the marriage, even if she's not 100% certain that the husband died, she'll say with the dummy, she'll say, well, I look like let's say it was a war, sometimes a kana. She looked at it, no way that anybody can survive from that. So she's happy to come back and say that he died. If it's not really considered age's probability is not good enough. So the Gemara, which the reason is the argal. What happens? What happens? He is the one who caused all this strife, not her. The way we learned until now was that she's the one who comes along and she wants to get out of the marriage. But what happens if he's the one who wants to get out of the marriage? She's happy to stay in. So then, if she comes along and says the husband died, if the reason is because she really wants to get out of the marriage and she lies and everything else, we're not going to say that in this case. But if it's because with the dummy that she is not 100%, but she's convinced that probability is good enough, then in this case, because of the ktata, the probabilities are good enough. It's not good enough ages. Now we have the same question we had before. What about if it's a single aid when it comes to ktata? When we know there's terrible discord there, and the 8 echad says the husband died. What's the reason? What's the shayla? Same question we had yesterday. My time. Is it 8 echad mehem? And why is it 8 echad belief? Because normally you need 2 eidim when it comes to these things. Is it because something which is evident, self-evident? He's not going to lie. It's not even proper ages. So who cares if there's discord or not discord? He's saying the fact that the man died, the man can come back tomorrow. So obviously he's telling the truth. So we will rely on an 8 echad in this case. Because not 8 echad is 2. Is the 8 echad and the wife. She will do proper investigations. Over here, given the East like Tata, over here, but because that there's argument and strife, she's not going to do a proper homework. She's happy to get out, and the probability is good enough for her. So therefore, if the Eid Echad is really 2 Eid, the Eid Echad and the wife, in this case, we don't know if the wife is really considered as an Eid Teiku. Therefore, we remain with a question. Mashiach will have to resolve. Interesting, in this case here, by the Eid Echad and the wife, and by Ktata, the Gemara remains with the Teiku. But in the previous question, we had the same question by if there's no Shalom in the world, there's a Muhammad in the world. More has the same question, but we don't remain with the Teiku. So the big Machalik is showing whether the Teiku goes on both questions, or whether there's some kind of a difference between if there's not Shalom Bayis and an Eid Echad, or there's a Muhammad and Eid Echad. Because remember, Rashi said over there by Muhammad that the Eid Echad also his Eidus might not be 100%. It might be a bit of dummy. He also might have come to the conclusion that the person died, even though it's not 100%. So if that's the case, that the take over here does not apply to this, it's a different question. Here, the Eid Echad has no reason to not to wait. If there's a strife between the husband and wife, what's it do with him? So he would, if he comes to court and says 100% the person died, then we believe it's 100%. It's not a case of a dummy, and therefore we have a shaila here. We maybe the teku, but over there, that the question is whether the Eid Echad himself was the dummy. Maybe there's no teku. Maybe even the Eid's witness testimony himself is no good, and therefore we shouldn't rely on it at all. Even the Eid Echad's Eidus, maybe his Eidus is weakened. Anyway, Rabbi says, Rabbi came along and says that the only time we believe a woman when she said their husband died is if she looks the part, she plays the part, that she's disheveled, unkempt, and so on, and she has tears in her eyes. Rabbi says, "La'olam eina." Tanya, we learned the brayso. The rabbi said, according to you, Pikach, as an intelligent woman who hates her husband, for example, doesn't really like him, and she's so thrilled that finally, that he's no longer back, he's not coming back. So Tanase, she's smart, she'll have crocodile tears, and she'll make sure she dresses the part like the grieving widow. Or B'shaita, like Tanase, but a shaita cannot get married because she doesn't know. She walks in simply, and maybe she's happy her husband's gone, and you'll say, we don't believe you. That doesn't make sense. Not fair. In both cases, you can get married. Big machlek is a shayim here because the Gemara says right here, shaita. Now we know since when can a shaita? It means the Gemara is saying that even the wife is a shaita, she's believed Eidus. Where do we find that a shaita is believed Eidus? Shaita Katan is not believed. What's pshat here shaita? So there's a big machlekes. Some want to say that when it comes to marriage, maybe we do. Others want to say shaita here doesn't mean the standard shaita that we normally say. Shaita means someone who's not a pikachas. It's the contrast of pikachas. No, someone who's not so smart, an ordinary person, simple person, who doesn't know any chachmas, innocently walks into bed and does the right thing. Doesn't mean necessarily shaita itself. Anyway, this person came to Bezin, the Rabbi Yehuda, the Bezin of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said the only time he would believe the woman is if she looks apart. Amr le Safri, so the Sefer said to her, Bailach, Sapti Bailach, the person the people who were utilizing her husband said to her, Kari Manach, let me give you some advice. Rip your clothes, Sasri Mazir, make your hair disheveled, which is very hard to understand exactly what that means because the hair is covered. What exactly does it mean, make the hair disheveled? Who can see what's going on under her cover? I'm not sure. Alfu Shikra, they said to him, what are you teaching him? So you're teaching her to lie? If the husband, why are you telling her to make believe that something happened if it didn't happen? The Gemara says, all of these people felt that look like Rabbanan, you don't have to play the part, we trust you as it is. Amri, but they told her, suggested to her, Tabit Hachi, you're going into the Bezin of Yehuda. He looks at you to see whether you're to be trusted or not. So he should also permit you and let you get remarried. So the Mishnah. We heard a story, which Gemara will tell us a story. We only heard that we believe if they're coming back from the harvest of the wheat, as Taisus brings from the Shalmi, in the harvest is in the summer, it's very, very hot, so it's quite likely that people get heat strokes and they can die. So if they came back after the season, the wife comes back into the season of the winter of the summer harvest, the wheat harvest, and says the husband died, we believe it because it makes sense. And in that particular country, because that's where the story happened in that country, and we saw that that's exactly what happened. So from then on in, we only, according to this hill, only in that country and in this particular harvest of the wheat. So Bishamai said to Bishal, I don't understand. What's the difference? Whether you came from the harvest of wheat, from olives, from grapes, it doesn't matter which country you're coming from, they travel and they come back. That story just happened to take place at that time. That's what happened. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's limited only to those particular events. So Beis Hillel said to Bishami, conceded you are right. If you're going to be so pedantic, it has to be in that country, it has to be a harvest, not anything else. So according to you, let's go further. It has to be the harvest of wheat. What about the harvest of barley? Maybe not. Then I know it's harvest. What about basic? What about cutting, grapes or cutting olives or cutting dates and other things? How do you know all the cases that if somebody dies from exertion, that we believe the wife? It doesn't make a difference where it happened. If she comes back and tells us this is what happened, you believe her. Just like you concede to me, it doesn't matter what kind of harvest it is. You're not so particular, and we believe her. So too, it doesn't matter which country it happened. We believe him. But Beis Hill, no. Initially, Beis Hill said, but only in that country. You know why? Because that country is a neighboring country to where we are, and there are constantly people traveling. So therefore, if she's telling us her husband died, she knows that there are people traveling all the time, and we can do a little bit. It's very easy to do investigations to see if that's true. So therefore, she's going to make that's the checks and balances to make sure they're telling the truth. The shkichi people of the admit that she's scared. But let's say to a distant city where people don't necessarily travel, then she can make up a story and get out of it. The shkichi is not worried. Shami disagrees. Even though people aren't traveling afoot, people traveling in caravans going, people always traveling. If you want to investigate, you can always check it out. Second one, what exactly is this incident we're talking about? In the end of the wheat season, it was. This is the story that happened. 10 people went out to the farms to go out there and harvest the wheat. And a snake came along and bit one of them, the mace. And that person died. Boss, Ishta, his wife came back, informed Bezin. This is the first time that this happened. Normally you would think you need 2 witnesses that the husband died. But this is the first time it happened. And they sent out, and they found out that her report checked out. So at that moment, they said, if a woman comes, even no witnesses whatsoever, not even one. And she comes back and says, my husband died. To Nasa, we can trust her. And even though we don't have Adis, and we wouldn't believe anybody else, but we would believe her. Mez Bali Tisyab. In fact, we also say if her husband died and was childless, he can marry the brother-in-law. Okay, so that's what the story is. And Beis Shammai convinced Beis Hill later on, that doesn't mean you have to follow exactly that story. It has to be tzichitin, has to be all that. It doesn't have to be that. Any reporter comes back, as long the only time that exceptions are if it's a time of war, she might have come to a conclusion not based on facts, or there's strife in the family. Says the Gemara, it's a name, let us say that Chananya ben Akiva Rabbanon, there's an argument, Chananya ben Akiva Rabbanon behind Gemara Chagiga is the same argument of Beis Shammai Beis Hill. When the story happened, and as a result of that story, make a gzeda, you have to follow exactly. We had the Gemara Shabbos there about the shoe. They walk with the sandals on Shabbos, and that we don't bring over here, because again, we say Ma'aseh Shahaya and so on. But over here, we don't bring that Gemara down at all. We said we bring the Gemara down behind Chagiga, which is the Tanvil, the Braisa. Lo Yisa Adam, a person should not transport mei chatas. A person should not transport the water of a paraduma mixed with the ashes, or even just a chatas, just the ashes of chatas. The yaviram biyarden and cross over the Jordan River, besvina by boat. Lo yamid b'tzad don't also toss it across the river, because that's almost like going by boat. Lo yeshita b'nei mayim, don't let them float on the water, which is like going on a boat. Lo yakivim, don't ride like a behemoth. So you're sitting in one place, just like a boat. You're standing in one place, and the boat transporting you. Same thing here. Lo yagabe chavedo, or sitting on top of your friend's shoulder and transporting the ephra chatas. Because of a story that happened. If you're sitting on an animal, whatever it is, the only way you can transport it is your feet have to be touching the ground. But you could walk over a bridge because your feet are on the ground. Echad Yarden, and doesn't make a difference whether it's the Jordan River or Echad Shamash, any river. We don't want you on a ship or anything similar to a ship. That's the Tanakama. Chananya ben Akiva says, "Amru el Yarden." No, it's limited. This gzeira is only limited to the Yarden. Uvesvina only by boat. Ukemaisa shahaya, because the incident that happened. Says the Gemara, Leima Rabbanan the Amar ke Beis Shammai. Rabbanan follow Beis Shammai that we, even though a story caused triggered this gzeira, doesn't have to be exactly like that story. So it could be any river and any means of transport if it's similar to a ship. And Chananya ben Akiva, the Amar ke Beis Hill, has to be exactly the way that's similar to the story. And we'll see in a minute what the story was. Even though we say over here by the ship, it doesn't matter what means of transport. If it's similar to a ship, it's forbidden. But when it comes to the story over here by Basil, but by the harvest, we might agree with Basil. There has to be a wheat harvest and so on. Or it has to be a harvest in a certain country. Why? What's the whole reason why we believe the wife, even though there's no aegis? Because she's not going to tell a lie because she's scared. She can be caught out. She's Mokum Kodem Mitzvah. If it's a neighboring city, okay, she knows that she can be easily caught out. But Mokum Rachel Mitzvah, if this is a city, she doesn't think it's easily caught out. And in her mind, she thinks that she won't be caught out, even though the Rabban can still do investigations, but she doesn't think that through. And therefore, it's possibly that she's not scared, and therefore maybe we can't believe her. Hocha over here in this story here, Mali Yarden Malashon is the basis for the Zero Sunsi. It makes no difference which river it is. If you're traveling by boat, it's a problem. And he says, I hold a flu Shammai. When did Beishamai say that? The whole reason why Beishamai says we trust her is because she will do her own homework. So it doesn't really matter which country it happened in and what kind of harvest was. It makes no difference. Comes back and reports that her husband died. We believe it because she will do thorough investigations because she knows the consequences. If she gets remarried and the husband returns, the children will be mamzerim, and she can't live with either of the husbands. Mali Mokum Kar, Mali Mokum Brachon. It doesn't really matter how close or far the city is. Hoch over here, maybe Beishamai would agree that no, we follow the story because the particular story that happened, one event happened, and as a result of that event became very machmir. We're talking about the paraduma, a very rare commodity, and therefore we have to just follow that story. It was a Yarden, it was Svina, the Havi Maisa. That's where the Maisa happened. Therefore, it goes in abundance. But Bishar noticed any other river. The Lahavi Maisa with the story did not take place like Gazan because this whole thing is an unbelievable chumrah. It happened once, and therefore we should never do it again. Things happen, and yet you make a gzeda forevermore. My Maisa, what actually happened? But there was a story. The person the person who was transporting the mechatas, the mixture, and also the ash of chatas in the yarden and by boat, the nimtza, and they found later on kazayis min hameis. They found a kazayis of a mace. In order for a mace to a corpse to generate tumah, it has to be the size of a kazayis, of flesh. Well, by blood we say either a kazayis or a revius, but by the flesh we say a kazayis, and it's found wedged into somewhere in the amongst the planks, the boards of the floor of the ship. And obviously the one became tummy, and they ruined this. So at that moment they said, you know what? Because what happened was the keli that they used, the vessel they used to store the ashes of the chatas was sitting right on top of that kazayas. So therefore it was an oil, and it became tamei. It's a real precious commodity. So they said, even though it only happened once, they said you should never transport again. Where? That's a machlekes. It was only the yard and only by ship, or anywhere. Okay, so we'll stop over here.